So, my own YouTube channel, 7 subscribers I've got at the moment. I'm not sure the manufacturers are going to be falling over themselves to send us cars for this. In fact, I'm thinking about just setting up a WhatsApp group. If you put your number below, I'll text you all. Audi RS6, fast, send. So then, Audi RS6, fast, really fast, really fast. Okay, so let's start with some numbers on this big fella because they are impressive. It has a 565 to 1,680 litre boot space, and the rear leg space is very... I'm just sticking about, obviously. I didn't mean those numbers, I meant... these ones. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate nothing like your dad's mate's big Audi estate. So up there is a 4-litre V8 petrol engine with 2 turbos on it, and that means it generates 600 PS, which is metric horsepower. For context, that's more than this thing. And also more than this thing. It's a supercar, basically. Look how quick it is, man. That whole supercar but wrapped in a practical shell thing has always been the RS6's shtick ever since the first one came out in 2002. But this one, new for 2020, maximizes both of those characteristics. We're talking Tyson Fury here, right? It really should not be possible for something this big and bulky to be also this quick and graceful.
And he's trying to do precisely that, and look at that, reactions of fury.
Audi really has scraped everything out of its engineering top drawer and thrown it all in the direction of this car. On issues of driving fun times, there are just so many engineering solutions going into making this car change direction quickly. It is of course a Suzuki Quattro, and the power is biased towards the rear in normal circumstances. It also gets adaptive air suspension as standard. That means you can choose between comfort and sport modes, blah de blah de blah. It's got a mechanical limited slip differential that splits the torque across the rear axle. It's got a system that brakes the inside front wheel when you corner in to tuck the car in even more. You can option stiff springs, which are still adaptable if you want to feel more of what's going on underneath you. You can also option carbon ceramic brakes of comically large circumference. And of course, it's got ABS and ESC and that sort of stuff. And 4-wheel steering. And that's not a new trick. You can already get it in the RS Renault Sport Megane Renault RS Renault Sport Megane. If you're not familiar, at low and medium sort of speeds, it turns the back wheels very slightly in the opposite direction to the fronts. Improves agility. Then at high speed, the back wheels turn the same way, which improves stability. Oh, and it's also got a variable steering rack, which makes the turn-in sharper, again at lower and mid-speed. It's a lot of stuff, right? Although regardless of what driving mode you're in, the first criticism I have of this thing is that it never feels quite as visceral as it should. That is a double-edged thing though, so in all of its suspension modes it does ride pretty well. It never feels needlessly firm, and that's especially impressive given that this particular car is on 22-inch wheels and with tyres like that. So it does do that thing where it judders a bit more than you want it to, but the damping is so good, and especially in comfort mode it's so supple that actually the ride quality of this car is always generally just pleasant. So it's comfortable, and that generally applies to all the areas of NVH, TBH. This is the sort of car that you can just sit in for mile after mile after mile and be very comfy all the way. The RS6 gets a mild hybrid system, which is a way of easing load on the engine in order to save fuel. For example, when you're on the motorway, it will allow the engine to be switched off entirely when you're coasting at certain speeds. It has cylinder shutdown too, so at times it's only using 4 of its 8. Now, all that means is that it's relatively, and I do mean relatively, economical. High 20s on the motorway over the last week, so not too bad. Not very supercar at all. Like, the chairs feel soft and fitted rather than clamping you in. It is ergonomically fantastical. All the screens look amazing and they're beautiful to use. Beauty is an aesthetic quality, but you know what I mean. Dead intuitive, just really nice haptic feedback, stuff like that. And the RS6 is generally very, very quiet, which is a blessing and a curse. Yeah, I feel like it's a bit too quiet. Like, the only real indicators that you're in £100,000 worth of estate. Yep, 100 grand this costs, ish. Gulp. or a distant rumble from the tailpipes, occasionally lumpy ride quality again, and a little more tyre noise than you might want or expect from a big fancy Audi. Yeah, just not that exciting. Now I know that it's a really hackneyed criticism of fast Audis, right? But if you are playing Audi review bingo, take a shot now, because this thing is just too clinical. Like, it can be manic and it also does look fantastic. Honestly, pictures do not get across how wide and aggressive this thing looks. 80mm wider than a standard A6 Avant, in fact, which in car design terms might as well be 8 foot. I mean, overall, right, you can just tell that Jurgen Klopp had a really lovely time when he was taking a break from managing Liverpool to design this car.
We are creating two-dimensional sketches, and we are also looking forward to finally see it on the street.
You do not expect something that is essentially a grey estate car to get this much attention, but it really does. Yeah, Darren, look at that, looks mint. It is far from ordinary, of course. It's just that you have to dig quite deep to find the really magical stuff. It's all very, very impressive, right? But you do end up feeling that any character this car could and should have had is buried underneath many, many, many layers of trickery that are all designed to keep this car stuck to the ground. Now, I'm not saying it's not brilliant, because it is. It's mega. It's so impressive in so many different ways. It's got tons of grip and it's really agile and it's obviously massively quick. And in sport mode, it is thunderously loud. Altogether, that stuff does give you this unique sense of wonder and amazement and fun. And it does have that cornering confidence and predictability that Audi has absolutely mastered now. And for me, there is just about enough interior theatre here. So it is obviously largely standard Audi A6, but that's a beautiful cabin to start off with. But if you get the carbon black edition, which this one is, you get an Alcantara steering wheel, an Alcantara gear selector, and some trim that's meant to look like carbon fibre, which is probably a little bit naff in a car that costs this much, but it does look nice at a cursory glance. I always think that Alcantara steering wheels are worth the money though, because as far as I'm concerned, any shaft covered in suede is an enjoyable shaft to hold. And the good thing about digital instrument panels now, right, is that they can use them to kind of uplift the cabin a bit in a way that you can't with static dials. So in this, if you put the car in RS mode, which you'll have probably guessed is the sort of super duper sports mode, stiffens the suspension up and makes the steering heavier and sort of sharpens up the gearbox and all that. Anyway, if you do that, you get this old school looking hockey stick rev counter. But at the risk of going back into horrible Audi cliche, get your shot glass ready. This is another Audi that you admire and respect greatly, but it's very difficult to fall in love with. It's like prog rock to the Audi R8's blistering 3-chord punk. I'm not saying the R8 is basic, obviously it's not, but there is something really visceral, there's that word again, about that car that this doesn't have. But the thing is, it could have had it. You so want this car to be an R8 that you can take the kids to school in, right? And Audi could have made it that way. Audi could have engineered it to feel like that, but it's not. They haven't. It sticks like Spider-Man, basically. And yet you can make it power slide if you want to. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about how impressive this car is, that it is a car that if you've got the right sort of skill, it can do anything that you want it to do. If you drive it carefully and smoothly, it is so predictable and so sticky. It never feels like it might get you into trouble, you know, if you get it a little bit wrong. And that's really cool, right? And I keep saying this, that it is its own sort of enjoyment. But if you want to look at this more like through the lens of it being a sports car, a performance car, then you would maybe say that the steering is a little bit too light and it's not really giving you quite the amount of feel that you want up through your arse and through your hands. Because there's always a balancing act with cars like this, isn't it? Because the fact is, the majority of the time, it's going to be used as just a practical estate and you're not going to be horsing around in it on a back road. So if you make it too much the driver's car, then it becomes a bit uncomfortable for the day-to-day stuff. So if you've optioned the carbon ceramic brakes, for example, which this car has, although they cost about 10 grand, so maybe you're not going to do that. They're phenomenal, right? They stop this thing like you've hit a brick wall. Bloody hell, the brakes work. But when the discs are warmed through, they're kind of grabby and hard to modulate, makes the car feel a bit clumsy. And weirdly, the gearbox is a bit like that too. So it's got an 8-speed Tiptronic, but it can occasionally behave like a twin clutcher. So it's a bit jerky on downshift, again, when you're just sort of going around the doors. Whole thing just feels a little bit jolty. But like, I'm putting this car under a microscope. I don't think this stuff's going to be a problem for anybody, because generally this is very comfortable, very quiet, very easy to drive. All I'm saying is that I just wish that the mad part of its character was a little bit more like the R8, just had a little bit more feel and a little bit more insanity, just a bit. The range then, at present there are 3 grades according to Audi's lovely website, but you are basically looking at 90 to 100,000 pounds worth of car. Me, I'd get the black edition because it looks brilliant from the outside and it's got all the suede stuff on the inside that's nice to touch. But, and if you pick up your shot glass again please, the basic RS6, such as it is, has all the stuff you'll really need.
Frank.
Well, apart from the loud exhaust and a decent stereo and the Alcantara bits and the carbon ceramic brakes and the stiffy suspension. And if you actually like your children, rear side airbags, they cost something too. So all the stuff you want, apart from all that stuff, for your 90 to 100 grand. And so we come towards the end and we do that other review thing. Pick up your shot glass again. Even though by now you're probably too drunk to be paying any attention.
Pass out.
Frank.
We ask what else you could buy for this sort of money. Let's go through the usual suspects. Stuff like the Mercedes E63S, which is quicker and more mental and still very comfy. Or this, or not actually, because for some baffling reason, that doesn't come as an estate anymore. Although, charge your glass people, because there is that thing that car reviews always do, where we suggest that you buy 2 cars instead, as though your 100 grand is actual cash in a briefcase and you're going to spend it.
Frank.
And you could buy a diesel Jaguar estate, say, and a Porsche. The fact is that you'll also probably want an SUV because it's 2020 and that's just what we do now. And so we get to this, roughly the same price, more practical because it's a bit fatter, a bit less quick because it's fatter, and yet definitely the car that I would choose with my 100,000 grands. Had you gone in there, didn't I? No, I do like the RS6. I like it an awful lot, and I think I would really struggle between this and the Mercedes E63S. So I think when it came down to it, I would choose this. I would choose the Audi. Actually, no, I wouldn't. I'd have the Merc. No, this. No, actually the Merc. No, this. No, the Merc. Thanks for watching, and I've never meant that more sincerely than I do now. I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye. Done. I am about to say things about this engine that are a little bit disparaging, but actually, sometimes when you're road testing, it is a little bit possible to go up your own arse a little bit and forget that actually this is just mental, and most people will see this as insane. Does catch you out a bit like. Your RS6 does have the most exotic introductory light dance you'll ever see. The so-called handshake. Although this particular light show is less like greeting someone with a handshake and more like standing in front of them and doing an aggressive pelvic thrust. How apt in these socially distanced times. Another thing to mention is that the 4-wheel steering thing is probably of more benefit when you're just going around the streets than it is when you're like tearing around elsewhere. A racetrack, I mean. And that's just because it seems to get the car swinging around really quickly with minimal effort. It just sort of adds to comfort. Makes what is a very long car feel agile. And it's one of the few things that's not on the options list. I'm actually getting quite a lot of wind noise out of this car, which I didn't really notice before. I wouldn't have said it was a car that suffered from wind noise especially. It's actually really quiet normally. So I'm just going to put that down to this being a very windy day and this being a quite open road that I'm on. Just in case you notice it. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate nothing like your dad's mate's big Audi estate. These are the numbers that make this. These are the numbers that make this big Audi. These are the numbers that make this. These are the numbers that make this. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate absolutely nothing like the. These is the numbers that make this big diesel. These absolutely nothing like the big diesel. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate absolutely nothing like your dad's mate's big Audi estate. For fuck's sake, Mark. These is the numbers that make this big Audi estate.